Good morning and welcome to Enterprise Bank Presents Dollars and Cents. My name is Prema Nagathan from Enterprise Bank. I'm the Security Director at Enterprise Bank, and I'm happy to come back on our show after taking a break in 2020. As we all know, 2020 has been a significantly unusual year for all of us due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As we were taking care of family and our friends and readjusting to a new work life, we had to take a little bit of a break from having these shows. But I am so excited and very happy to be back today, talking about some very important topics and having two very special guests. With me today, I have Middlesex County's District Attorney, Marian Ryan, and former host of Enterprise Bank Presents Dollars and Cents, former chief of Lowell Police, and former member of the Enterprise Bank team, Ken Lavallee. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prema.
So I was recently reading a FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, released their 2020 fraud report, and I was in a way, not really surprised to see the fraud report, but also the numbers I just wanted to share with you and our viewers today who are listening in is the 2020 fraud report shows that over 2.1 million consumers had reported that they were a victim of fraud, of which $3.3 billion in losses were suffered by the consumers. These are big numbers, but these are just the very small percentage of cases that are being reported. A lot of times, as you know, people don't report the cases for various reasons. Either one, they're embarrassed that they fell victim to a scam, or they just don't want to talk about it. And one of the goals that has been on our show is to really raise awareness that fraud schemes can really target anybody, you, me, anybody. And we really want to remove the stigma of being a victim of a fraud, but to really raise the awareness so people who are listening to our show can learn from this and be aware of what's going on with new fraud trends that are out there, and also share with their family and friends. So quickly with that, Ken, I want to ask you, how has life been post-retirement for you? And as a consumer, what are you seeing with the fraud world out there?
Well, I will tell you that having retired from Enterprise Bank in June of last year, I continue to have dialogue with people in the community who actually have told me they've seen and watched this show, even after we had taken a hiatus and the show went on pause for a little while because of the pandemic. But I think that what I'm seeing in all my police journals and my studies relative to my teaching at a community college is that the pandemic actually exacerbated the entire process of this type of scam activity. People now are more confined to their homes, and they are now online more than they used to be, and they're falling prey to so many things that are being put out there on the internet, particularly when it comes to scams, fraud, things like the romance fraud, the romance scam. People are falling prey to that. People are lonely. People are sending money to individuals who they think they have a relationship with, but clearly it's not true. It's a scam. And I think that, the other disinformation that's out there is we're seeing it throughout the country, leading to some violence, things that are being, people are believing what they see in social media, and it's not true. So it's really become a much more serious problem in the last year. And I know that, and I would assume that in the district attorney's office, Marian has seen probably an uptick in this type of activity as a result of, the pandemic. Is that an accurate assessment, Marian?
It certainly is. I mean, for some of the reasons that you mentioned, as we always say, one of the reasons lots of these scams work is because they happen in secret. If somebody said something to me about start sending money to someone, and I was sitting talking with both of you, even just the process of hearing myself say it, I would realize how silly that sounds. But people are much more confined to their homes. For lots of our elder citizens, they're not going out to the senior centers and talking to their friends or seeing somebody. Maybe if I was a little suspicious and I was at the senior center, I'd run it by someone. If I'm not there, I'm not calling them up to do that.
Mhm.
I think we've seen, Ken, as you mentioned, people appropriately have been using their computers for everything. People have been ordering their medication, their groceries. So they're putting a lot more of their personal information out there. The other piece is there's been availability of things like the stimulus checks and all of that. So that's encouraged unemployment, that's encouraged people to engage in fraud. And then one of the things that, two of the things, I guess, really that take advantage of people. Number one, people have obviously been scared about their own health and wanting to get the vaccine. And you can't look anywhere without hearing it's been hard to line up appointments and all that sort of thing. So there's lots of scams helping you to get the kit that's going to vaccinate you at home, get the ride to get your shot, that sort of thing. And then probably the hardest part for people to talk about is there are legitimately lots of people who've suffered some very severe financial reversals during this. They've lost their job, they've lost their business. Well, that makes some elderly relatives or neighbors sometimes a much bigger target because, I've lost my job, my husband's lost his job, and my mom has got some resources. And that's, the famous line, it's only going to be this one time, I'll pay them more, and then we'll get back. And of course, that isn't it. So there's just a lot of things that have come together and really increase the number of fraud situations we're seeing.
Mhm.
So Marian, with just specifically the pandemic, certainly the vaccine, I have received emails about, getting access to free vaccine. I'm currently waiting to get qualified through the government so I can receive my vaccine. But there's also been some reports as far as with the new COVID-19 benefits and stuff like that. Are you seeing investigating cases that are resulting from some of the fraud resulting from that type of schemes?
We are. I mean, some of it is, as I mentioned, things like this is the way you can get the first appointment next Monday. You can't buy an appointment. The vaccine itself is completely free. The government has paid for that, but they're sending emails to people, for $29.99, you can get your vaccine reserved someplace. We saw a big uptick in the proposal that if I drove somebody to a site who was over 75, I could get my vaccine.
Mhm.
And so we had a lot of people who either really wanted to get there, so they were willing to pay. And, having strangers come to your door and money be involved is never going to be a good thing. And people just getting a lot of information. As I always say, one of your best protections is your door, your locked door. So once you're letting people in your house, that's a problem. And that's almost implicit in people coming to pick you up or drive you somewhere.
So from that aspect, that really is a problem because also from a personal safety,
Mhm.
like you said, it's just you don't know who these people are. You could be potentially also exposing. You really have to be mindful these days with the contact, with who you have contact with. So to really be careful, if there are certain family members that will take care of you and need to protect themselves or protect the elders, and that might be a different category. As far as unemployment claims and stuff like that, one of the things that I recently myself became a victim to is I was notified that somebody had filed an unemployment claim in my name. I'm currently fully employed. I am certainly not, it wasn't me who filed that. So, I was able to take the steps and, file a police report and file it as a victim of an ID theft. But do you have any insight on what might be happening or who's really involved and how are people? One of the common questions I get is how did they get my information? What do you think, Marian, is happening?
I think there's a couple of things. I think, first of all, you all know. I mean, I think we all see if you start looking on your phone or your computer, looking to buy a new refrigerator or something, suddenly you're inundated with refrigerator ads. So clearly your information gets out there. I think, as I mentioned, one of the things is everybody's been legitimately putting more of their information out, because I want to get my prescriptions delivered. I want to get my groceries. So there's information out there. I think you should always assume that people have your information.
Yeah.
The second piece is that people sometimes aren't paying attention to something that would alert them to that fraud. So for instance, and like you, Prema, we've had a lot of people in our office who've been victimized by these scams, you know, obviously friends and neighbors telling us the same thing. But if you get something in the mail, or you get some kind of an email that seems to be talking about you having worked someplace that you never have worked, don't just dismiss it. You know, we all get so much junk. I see something come in from some workplace and I think I don't know anything about them and I just dismiss it. Right now, you really do need to take a look, because that's one of the first tip-offs that somebody has filed in your name. And the problem is, when you then go to file your own income tax, or you're trying to collect, it really becomes a very frustrating long-term way of trying to untangle yourself from the Marian Ryan who filed that unemployment claim. So people just really need to be alert. And usually I'm saying, if you get junk emails or junk paper mail, throw it away. But if it looks like it's really addressed to you, just pay a little bit of attention. I think one of the things we've seen, for instance, is we all know you get often, if you've had some kind of medical care, you get that form from the insurance company or the facility. It says this is not a bill. So you look at it, you think not a bill, and you throw it away. You need to look and make sure that that's somebody you actually saw and you received that service. Because very often people have been filing claims on your insurance and you think not a bill, not my worry, and you throw it away. But be sure you check, is that a provider you went to? Did on or about that date, did you actually have that? It's particularly true, we've seen it around medical devices. So maybe you had some surgery, you've gotten a boot, maybe you got a cane, you got something. People are getting billed 4 and 5 times. The insurance company is getting billed 4 and 5 times for that. So pay attention to what you see coming in and call your insurance company. If you don't recognize Dr. Jones, or you never had an x-ray of your left arm, let somebody know that, because you're not paying for it, but somebody is paying for it.
Mhm.
Right, because
Marian.
sometimes, Ken, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to mention, and I just wanted to follow up on the thought about loneliness and how people are now confined to their homes. They're not having that social activity anymore with family, with friends, and now they're reaching out on the internet. And have you seen an increase, I would assume you have, in terms of these romance scams, people who are, taking advantage of those who are lonely and confined to their homes?
Yes, you might have just heard there was some publicity about one a couple of weeks ago. The individual had taken advantage of 11 women to the tune of just enormous sums of money. And again, things that when you heard them on the radio, you thought, who would ever believe that? But people are in their own house, they're communicating, they're just happy to have a connection, and maybe they're not as on guard as they should be. And the other piece is, and this happens every winter, but it's been very dramatic this year, very appropriately, maybe I don't want to be out in the ice. It's not good for me to drive on certain days, coupled with the virus. Well, now I'm setting up email exchanges with somebody who's going to the grocery store for me or picking up something, and then they're introducing me to somebody else. I feel like, well, I got them from Ken or Prema, so they're okay. And it's really not. It's just a complete scam. Anybody who's asking you for money on the internet that you can't physically identify, that's not going to end very well. And the other piece, of course, is because people haven't seen their family for so long, all of those other scams like the grandchildren scam or whatever, I'm getting the email from my granddaughter who's out in Colorado. Well, I haven't seen her for a year, and so the story she tells me sounds kind of okay. Those have increased very dramatically.
So what are some of the red flags with the romance scam? I mean, there are legitimate dating websites. People have found, lifelong partnership through dating websites, which is perfectly fine. What should people particularly look for that would indicate it's a scam?
Number one is anybody who wants you to send them money. I mean, I think a good baseline rule is if I don't physically know you, we say this to kids all the time. We tell kids not to do things with strangers. Well, if I've never actually physically met you, you're really a stranger. And so giving up sums of money is not something you should be doing. And especially in the context, it's often in the context of really convoluted stories. I'm being held as a prisoner here, or I have to buy back my passport and all of those things. Those are the kind of things that even if you think it's legitimate, at least stop, talk to somebody you trust and tell them the story. Hear that story out loud. And a lot of times that kind of illustrates to you, or the person you're talking to will say, Prema, Ken, you would say to me, well, have you ever actually seen this guy? Or what country is it he says that he's in? It's really sometimes very simple. And those are probably the least reported things because they're so embarrassing. Mm-hmm. They involve your judgment. You are lonely and nobody wants to admit that. And you thought you'd found a friend or a romantic partner. They're heartbreaking. And they often really change the shape of somebody's planned and saved for retirement because they lose massive chunks of money. The likelihood of us finding them through 12 IP addresses in two different countries is very small. And even if we did, the fact that you might actually get your money back in any timely fashion is probably not going to happen.
That's really terrible. And what we also saw in a few cases was on the unemployment scheme, these individuals who believed that they were friending someone online as part of a dating app, they were being told that they have an unemployment claim that belongs to someone that they know, they don't have a bank account, and they just needed to use this person's bank account to just send the proceeds. And then they would ask them to then send the money to another individual. So they're being used as a mule. Unsuspecting consumers are being used as a mule. And now they become part of the fraud scheme. And they're just doing, if they think they're helping someone, they're actually doing something wrong because that's criminal. You're helping launder funds that don't really belong to you.
Mm-hmm. And that happens all the time. I think all of us think about money laundering as some high level organized crime thing. It happens all the time in terms of people renting apartments, buying something. You get a check, you sold something. We're one of the places that happens all the time. Somebody sells something on eBay or something, and you sold it for $200. They send you a check for $500. Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Send me back $3. You are never going to see that $3 again. And the $500 check is going to bounce. And people don't realize that really is, you are literally washing the money through your account. And that's just not what we think about when we think of money laundering.
Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting point that you bring up too. And a lot of times we have our customers who unfortunately do fall for that type of an online, I'm trying to sell something online scheme. And they bring the check to the bank and they deposit the check. They come in the next day, they withdraw the funds. And then, 2 or 3 days later, we contact them, letting them know that the check that they deposited was a bogus check. And now, unfortunately, they lost the money because they've either wired it out or sent gift cards. And oftentimes customers will ask us and they'll say, well, but the money was in my account. The check had cleared the next day. And oftentimes it can be confusing for consumers and customers. But unfortunately, what happens in this case is the bank does make funds available to you. That doesn't mean the check is a good check. And unless the customer discusses with their bank that, oh, they received this check as part of a scheme or something that they're trying to sell online, there is nothing we can do ahead of time to really prevent that from happening. So something I want, folks who are listening in today is talk to your banks, really reporting or asking someone, does this make sense? Why would someone send me more money than I'm really asking for? Maybe you should just ask them to resend another check. Because once you wire the money out, once you send the gift card, it's gone. The money is gone. There's nothing you can do to claim it back. Great.
Well, Prema, you raise a really good point, which is not only is ever giving money to strangers not a good idea, but ever doing anything with money in a hurry is not going to be a good idea. For instance, every one of those check swaps would be avoided if you just had a policy. I never respond to any check for 2 weeks, because within that 2 weeks, you would find out that the check bounced. that you put in. So, and that is often part of how the scam gets going. There's a lot of rush and frantic activity. It's got to happen by 4 o'clock this afternoon. You'll miss out. And, you know, to be fair, and one of the things people need to just sort of take a step back and think about themselves, if it's such a great deal that if you don't jump on it in the next 10 minutes, it's probably a fraud. Like, you know, that's what happens. People feel like, oh my goodness, I'm going to get whatever for this reduced price if I just do it in 10 minutes. Most deals don't have a 10-minute expiration date. Or, you know, we're going to send the UPS truck in a half an hour. That's not a good idea. Just give yourself enough of a cushion. If you have rules about what you do, like I say to people all the time, your rules should be that I never sign a contract on the front steps. So if that's just your rule, then you don't have to rethink what happens. If somebody comes to the front door, you say, I don't sign things on the front steps. Mail it to me and come back in 2 weeks. I guarantee you it will go away. They won't pursue that because they're trying to just make as much money as quickly as they can. You know, it's like I never give money. You can have a rule, you never give money over the phone. That's going to save you from so many things if you just very politely say, because people don't like to be rude, I have a policy that I don't give money over the phone. Thank you very much. You know, I have a policy that I wait 2 weeks before I refund any money about anything. Those things will just, if it's a great deal and you're going to get to take advantage of it, you still will. But you also will save yourself so much money and so much hurt and aggravation.
I think that it's
yeah, Marian, you brought up a thing about grandparents, and especially now that everybody is isolated in your homes, you can't see your family too often. Hopefully that'll all change soon. One of the things, Ken, you and I would work on quite frequently is the grandparent scam. And I'm sad to report to you, it hasn't gone away. It continues. It continues. And do you want to talk about some of the ones that we've seen with grandparent scam and how it really works?
So one of the new, I can just add one of the new scams for this, the virus is, you know, Nana, I'm at school. Ken, my roommate, has come down with the virus. They want me to go stay at a hotel. That sounds perfectly legitimate. And you certainly don't want your grandson to stay with Ken because he's sick. So you're suddenly sending the money to pay, allegedly, to pay for the Marian.
So there's always they're looking for opportunities, and it seems to make sense. I recently found out with the weather issues in Texas and people having lost their homes, there was emails coming, you know, trying this charity and, you know, try to donate money. What can you tell our viewers today about the charity scams? Because we want to help people.
You want to take that, Ken?
Well, I was just going to say that clearly every time there's a natural disaster or some type of unrest in the country, the scammers take advantage of that, and they push out these requests for money, and you think it's going to a legitimate purpose. You think it's going to help the people who are in dire need, but in reality, it's going to people who are just taking advantage of you. So I guess the best thing to do is to send your funds to legitimate organizations that you know exist, like the American Red Cross, other organizations like the Salvation Army, places that you know have a legitimate purpose in society. And if you get an email, and I always focus on this, from someone, I have no idea who these people are, what organization they represent, even those who have official sounding names. We represent police unions, we represent the fire union. Those unions and those types of representations that come across my desk, I typically ignore, because I think that they're just really typically a scam trying to you get your funds. And I noticed that when I get an email, a text message, or a phone call from someone I don't recognize, or a number I don't recognize, it's not in my contacts, I never even answer the phone. I let it go to voicemail, and let the voicemail, then I'll determine if indeed I should return that call. And typically, more often than not, it's not a call I want to return. So I would suggest that people who get these text messages, phone calls, just delete them right away and not even worry about. I had an elderly family member who had received one of these emails from Social Security, a phone call from Social Security saying that they were about to, shut off his Social Security, and he was in tears. He was so distraught. He thought it was real. And And he called them back, and I told him, I said, never call these people back. They're not going to call you on the phone. If there's any communication from Social Security, expect to get it through the mail. So that's my advice to people.
So it's almost March. Well, we're in mid-March, and now upon us the tax season. So we're all filing taxes, and oftentimes people will tell me they got a call from the IRS, and that they, their taxes weren't filed properly last year, and now they're in big trouble. There's an arrest warrant. Marian, how does the tax scams, IRS scams work, and what should people really be looking out for?
So the simplest piece is what Ken mentioned about Social Security. I can absolutely promise you that neither Social Security or the IRS will be calling you. So if you pick up the phone and someone says, this is the IRS or this is Social Security, I am 110% sure that that is a scam. So you should just disregard the phone calls. As anybody knows, and I tease all the time about it, I don't think the IRS and Social Security have phones. They communicate everything in writing. If you want to communicate with them, you have to write the letter and send it off to whatever place. So I would completely disregard anything that was not an actual paper letter. Because if you see, especially if you look at emails and things, what they're very clever about is the address will look very much like what it would be, but it's a slash off, it's a period off. So if you really, first of all, you should disregard it. But if you were going to think about doing it, look very carefully at that and you'll see there's something wrong with that. Mm-hmm. I just got one myself, which really appeared to be from my own bank. And I thought, this is odd. Mm-hmm. And yet when you looked close enough, there were a couple of extra slashes in it. And it did, things like Social Security or IRS, it's always going to end in .gov. And of course, a person can't do that, so you're not going to see that. So you can just sort of eliminate everything if you think, when I'm dealing with a federal agency, unless I have a piece of mail in my hand, I should disregard it. And the other piece is, you are never going to get a piece of physical mail from a federal agency that has all kinds of advertising kind of things on the envelope. So the things that say, now is the time to act quickly, get the 1.4% rate, the government doesn't send that to you. They can't use the government printing office to put that kind of stuff on envelopes. So the chances of that happening are so small.
And I think, you've been stressing is don't act too quickly, because what the process are trying to do is they don't want you to talk to anybody about what's happening, and then you just panic, or there's a sense of urgency, or the deal's too good, send the money now. So they know once they get that, then they're off to the next victim.
Yep.
We're kind of about 4 minutes towards wrapping up our show, but I want to ask actually both of you is, computers, smartphones have become a way of life for us to communicate with the world. And with that, obviously, has opened up the other concerns with, getting scammed through online means. One of the things that I'm thinking of right now is like the Microsoft, someone that's, connecting to your phones. And there are a lot of secure means, people will ask is online banking secure? Yes, it is, but there is a certain responsibility and awareness that's required by the customers and the consumers, is to not give someone access to your device so now they can see your online banking. Mm-hmm. Any word of caution or what we are seeing with online scams?
So you should never, very often you'll be online yourself, you're doing whatever you're doing, and something will pop up, call right now, call Apple, call MSN, whatever your provider is. That is a very dangerous scam, because if you think about your data being kind of protected by a firewall, reaching out to somebody when you have your information open is like creating holes in that wall. Mm-hmm. So never, ever make that phone call, because they're going to start keystroke following you, and they're going to be telling you, press this button, go here, go there. What you're doing is you're creating doorways for them. So if you get that, and if you're concerned, I've had people say, oh, I thought I would lose all my pictures right away or whatever. Go away from your computer, use a phone, a landline if you have one, and call your provider. And you're going to find out that they aren't reaching out to you. That's a total scam that they're doing. And it's very tempting. I think even very sophisticated users, they start telling you, well, just click here, open this window. And before you know it, you're 10 steps down the road. So you should never have somebody directing you unless you called them to ask for help.
Ken,
You
do
know,
you have any word of caution for student population out there?
Yeah, I think that young people, typically are in desire of money. They look for easy ways out. They look for easy ways to make funds, particularly now with the situation we're in with the economy as it is. So they would probably be more vulnerable to a scam like that. And as you know, all of the same suggestions we've brought up during this conversation are really something I think they should consider and follow as well. I think that Marian points out about the I just got a text message a few weeks ago that my phone was corrupted and I was going to lose all my data and I needed to contact them right away. So at first, it took a second, right? I said, "Oh my God, this is terrible. I'm really going to be in trouble here." And then I thought about it and I said, "Wait a minute, this is not correct." So I shut my phone off and I removed that text message and have not received anything since then. Clearly, so it was a scam. So I think people of all ages, whether you're a student in college, whether you're an elderly person, and everywhere in between, are vulnerable, and particularly in this day and age when everybody's confined to their homes. And hopefully, as the better weather arrives and the pandemic starts to loosen its grip on the country and the region, we'll be in much better shape. Although I think that these problems will never go away. I think we're going to be battling this for years to come, clearly.
Wow, thank you. There's this, we've covered so many different fraud schemes that are currently, I think, very prevalent that really people, I'm hoping, will listen in today and be more aware should they come across an email, someone at their doorstep really trying to take advantage of them. From a banking standpoint, I always stress is the bank will never ask you for your personal information, your PIN numbers, your passwords. The bank will never ask you. Nobody should ask you that information. You should always take a step back and kind of rethink why is someone asking you for those particular information. And in closing, just want to say, thank you, District Attorney Marian Ryan. Thank you so much for the insight and thank you for everything that you do to keep our communities safe. Ken, it is great to have you back on the show. This is a concept that really was introduced by you to really say that, knowledge is power. We need to talk more and more about this, make this part of a normal day-to-day conversation so we can prevent, losing money or losing your personal information, which is such a critical thing these days. So I just want to say thank you so much to both of you. And I also want to close by saying the District Attorney's Office is a great resource to every consumer in the Middlesex area. If you're a victim of a scam, whether you lose money or not, we can reach out to you, right, Marian, your office, to really report these so we can hopefully protect other people from falling victim.
Yes, please tell us, because that's how we get the word out to people of what's out there and cause them to think a little bit before they do something. So thank you. It's great to see you both. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Marian.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe. Thank you.